Welcome back to Bubbles and Splash, everybody. Hello, good morning. It is so good to see you with us. Now, if you're new here for the first time, you're very welcome. We're going to have a story. And then a little bit later, we're going to do some craft activities. And then we're going to have a song. How good's that? So, welcome back. Now, this week we're starting on a new series of stories. We've just finished learning all about Moses and all that happened to Moses and how God used him to lead his people, the Israelites, out of Egypt and into the promised land. And this story that we're going to have today takes place quite a long time later. The Israelites are in a different position. Now, do you remember, if you've been with us all the way through these videos, do you remember the first story I ever told you? Do you? It had some numbers in it. It had the number 5 and the number 2 in it. And it was about a little boy. Do you remember? Maybe you do. Let me tell you, it was about a little boy who had 5 loaves and 2 pieces of fish for his lunch. And when he brought them to Jesus, Jesus was able to feed 5,000 people with them and still have food left over. Well, this week's story is about another little boy who has lunch. Now, this little boy, he was called David, and he had lots of brothers. He had 7 brothers, and he was the youngest brother of all of them. He was the youngest, littlest one. And his brothers were all older than him, and they had all gone off to fight with the Israelite army because the Israelites were in a battle with some people called the Philistines. And so David's dad, he came up to him and he said, look, I'm concerned about your brothers. They've been out on the battlefield a long while. Take them some lunch for me. Will you take their lunch to them and go and send it to them? Now, he was only young David, but he wasn't scared to do this because he was a shepherd. So he looked after sheep for his father. And so he was used to having to look after the sheep, and sometimes animals would come and they would try to attack the sheep, and he would use he would kill the animals to protect his sheep, and he would do something called a sling. Now, a sling is like a little piece of material with some kind of strings attached to it, and you put a stone inside the bit of material, it kind of holds it in, and then you take the strings together in your hand and you twirl the thing around, and then you let it go and it flies off, and the stone is, the idea is the stone hits the animal and it kills it. So he would use this sling and stones to kill the animals that were trying to attack the sheep, so he could save the sheep, and that they could have that was the work that he did, and that was how they got money. And they would look after sheep. Sometimes they would eat the sheep, they would use its wool for clothes, they'd use lots of different things and do lots of different things with it. So he was used to being in slightly scary situations. So when his dad said to him, will you take the lunch to your brothers? He was like, yeah, come on, I'll go into the battlefield and I'll go and find my brothers and I'll give them their lunch. So we find ourselves on the battlefield, and the Israelites are lined up, and David is approaching them, and he goes to find his brothers and give them the lunch. And there's a lot of talk in the Israelite camp, and people seem a little bit scared of something. So David kind of asks, what's going on? And out in the distance, where the Philistine army are, across the fields, he can see this massive man. And his brothers say to him, he said, we're fighting the Israelites, but we're scared. The Israelites have got this massive man, a giant called Goliath. And he's challenging us to go and fight him. But we're not going to go and fight him. We're too scared. Look at the size of him. He's massive. Now, David, who was tiny, could see this Goliath from quite a distance away, and he was massive. If you imagine the room that you're in now, right? I bet some of you have got like a dad or a granddad who's quite tall, but they can fit through the doors. They don't have to duck to get through the doors. Well, Goliath was that tall. He would most definitely have had to duck to get through the doors. And he might not have even got his shoulders through. He might have had to turn sideways and kind of shuffle through the door. He was that big. He was massive. If you imagine the room that you're in right now and look up at the ceiling, he was taller than the ceiling. And probably more. He was probably almost as tall as your house. Maybe. And so David sees this giant, and he's like, well, I can kind of see why no one wants to go and fight him. He's massive. And Goliath is shouting, come on, send someone to fight me. And he's really scary. He's shouting all that distance, and all the Israelite soldiers are too scared to go and fight Goliath, because they know if they go and fight him, Goliath's going to win because he's so big. So, David, little David, he's seen Goliath and he's given his lunch to his brothers now. And he thinks, I can have him. I'm used to fighting lions and bears when I'm trying to protect my sheep. With God on my side, I can go and fight that giant. So off he goes and he finds the king, King Saul. And he says to King Saul, I'll fight him. I will fight the giant. And Saul looks at him and kind of goes, but you're so small. And so David says back to Saul, he says, look, I'm used to being out in the fields. There are lions and there are bears and they come and attack my sheep. And I kill them because I want to protect my sheep. I'm used to fighting. I may be small, but I can do this with God on my side. So Saul says to him, well, I've got no one else to fight him, so okay then. But Saul says, I want you to make sure you're protected. So you take my armour, put my armour on. So David puts his armour on and says, take my spear and take my shield and take my helmet so you're all protected. So David puts on Saul's armour. He puts on his helmet and he puts on his armour. And he takes his spear and his shield and he walks around and he's like, oh my goodness, this is far too heavy. And it's big on me. The helmet, I can hardly see because the helmet is coming down over my eyes and the armour is down to my knees. It's far too big because David was only little. And so he says, I can't wear that. He says, I'll just use what I use when I fight the animals when they're attacking my sheep. So he takes his sling and there's a stream nearby. So he goes over to the stream and he picks out 5 little stones and he puts them in a little bag that he has around his waist. And he said, right, I'm ready. I'm going to go fight the giant. So he starts to walk out across the field to where the giant is, where the giant Goliath is. And Goliath sees him coming and he starts laughing and he says, are you sending someone with sticks to fight me like you would a dog? He's taking the mickey out of him. He doesn't think that David can do anything to hurt him. So David says back to him, he said, I'll fight you. He says, and I will fight you with God behind me. God will be with me when I fight you. And when I defeat you, when I win against you, and all your Philistine army, they go running away, he said, you will know and they will know and the Israelites will know that I won because it was God with me. So Goliath is still like, nah. So he starts walking towards David thinking, I'm going to have him. This is it. This is going to be an easy fight for me. I'm going to win this, no problem. And David, he takes his sling and he takes one little stone out of his pocket and he puts it in his sling. And he starts making it go round his head. And then all of a sudden the stone flies up, 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 up. It hits Goliath straight between the eyes in the middle of his forehead. And Goliath goes... He falls face down on the ground. And there's silence. And they watch him to see if he's going to move. Is he going to get up? And they watch him. And he's still. And nothing is happening. So David, he walks over to Goliath. And he takes Goliath's sword out of his belt. And he chops Goliath's head off. And there is a cheer that goes out from the Israelites. Woo! Hey! Because they know that David, little tiny David, with just one stone, has killed the giant Goliath. And the Philistine army, they see what's happening. They see that their champion Goliath, that he's been killed, and they think, oh heck, we're in trouble now. So they start running in the opposite direction. And so the Israelites chase after them to go and defeat them. And so in our story, David is this little boy who defeats this massive giant, all because he knows that with God, he can do anything, no matter how big or how small he is. And I want you to know that, guys. I want you to know that you might only be small, but when God is on your side, you can do so much. When you know God's love and that He loves you and that He will do anything for you, you can do anything. So believe in yourselves. Don't let being small stop you from doing something. Go and give it a go. Go and try. Try your best, because God is on your side and He's with you every step of the way. And He'll help you to do the things that you need to do. So what a great lesson is that. Remember the story of little David and how he defeated the massive giant. You can do anything when God is on your side. Now, we've got a lovely little activity to do today for our craft. So we're going to go next door into the kitchen and do that. So I'll see you in a minute.